Hi, this is the any percent world record for the girl and the robot. This is done on the latest patch, the one you can currently download on Steam. This is now the fastest version of the game, uh, whereas previously it was the older version due to some tech that we could use. Found some things this week that saved around 30-40 seconds, so this version is now the quickest. Also the first version that I managed to get a sub 19 on. So that's nice. Kind of wanted to make this video just to kind of talk about some of the key differences between the two versions. Just for anyone thinking of picking up either version, they're both similar, but also both quite different runs. So like I say, the main thing that we used to use in the old version was an AI glitch where we could basically just turn the AI off. That let us go to areas as the girl that you wouldn't normally be able to get to, just because you'd be captured by the enemies as soon as you got there. There's a lot of narrow hallways where the enemies are, and the hitbox is pretty wide to capture the girl. So in old patch we just jumped right past it. New patch, we had to kind of get inventive with what we had to do. You'll notice if you were to watch the two videos side by side, this version would look a lot slower up until around the last level, where they introduced about a minute and a half time save. I don't think they intended to, but they did. So that's how this patch ends up being quicker overall. Like I say, up to this point, it's mostly the same. You kind of go through. I mean, I spoke about this in my other video, so I won't explain it too much here. But again, things like this sort of movement isn't the quickest, but it is the quickest to move as two characters. Try not to do this too much, obviously, 'cause it takes time for the robot to pick up the girl, and it takes time for the robot to put down the girl. So each time you do this, costs about maybe 5 seconds. And then the movement's not as quick as just with the girl. So that's the general idea of the game, is to avoid switching between the characters as much as possible and avoiding having to move as both characters as much as possible. So we avoid that a little bit here. We do a death warp right here just to bring the robot back up to our level, because there's a checkpoint at top which we can abuse. Here comes the first main difference between old patch and new patch. What we used to do here was we'd actually run through into this room as the robot and activate this button on the floor, and then because we could freeze the enemies, we could just run through here as the girl. As you can see, it's pretty tight hallways, and their hitboxes are huge, as I said before. So trying to avoid these guys is an absolute nightmare. It's doable, but it's an absolute nightmare. And then, as well, up here, they also changed some of the enemy spawns. So even if we were to get up here with just the girl, and then do the old skip of jumping around the right corner, the enemies would spawn afterwards, and mean that we couldn't get round to pull the lever, which we'll get to in a minute. So overall, this is generally the quickest way. You'll see I'm running down here, and I'm going to come right back out. That's just to hit a checkpoint. I'll explain checkpoints more in detail a bit later. But you'll see here, I had to go around the other side of this platform here. Not just because it's quicker, also to avoid an enemy spawn, which is on the far right hand side. Normally you would just walk around, because it's a lot safer. And on old patch you can freeze the enemies, but in this patch, if you go on the other side, it stops the enemies from spawning, which is nice. And that's the quickest way of doing that, really, unless you want to go super risky strats, but then you'd have to do 2 corner jumps in a row, which would be very tricky to get, because I only get it maybe 1 every 3 times or something. Here's another difference between old patch. Old patch, we used to skip this puzzle. It wasn't actually too much quicker than just memorizing it. Actually, I talk about memorizing, actually. This puzzle is slightly random. There's 3 possible combinations it can be. And you'll hear there the stone turning. You can tell which result it's going to be by how much it turns. You don't actually need to look at it. So I got the third pattern, which is the second quickest. First pattern's quickest, just because of the path you take to solve it. And second combination is slowest. Just gets a little bit glitched. If you do it too quickly, it will fail you regardless. Yeah, so third pattern was okay. But as I said before, an old patch we used to skip that, but it involved swapping through characters quite a bit and doing a slightly tricky maneuver with the robot. So it was only maybe a couple of seconds quicker than just memorizing it and doing it that way. We're coming to a part here. There's a checkpoint over here that can only be activated by the robot, which is why we have to bring both characters up here. It's unfortunate. They kind of this whole first parts of the game are really just more of a huge tutorial for the mechanics. Like, oh, you have to use the robot for some bits and a girl for other bits. That's why I had the arrow outside that, like the target, whatever, outside that gate, and then a lever that you have to jump up to. In this part, it's all just kind of hitting home each character's strengths. Like, here I messed up a little bit. I was going to take some damage to so I can move quicker later on, because that's a mechanic that's in the game, but it wasn't a good position, so I went against it. But like I say, it's just trying to hit home the strengths of the two characters. Like, the girl is fast, faster, she can jump, and she can fit through tight spaces, whereas the robot can fight people. He's generally stronger, he can move heavy objects, and he can shoot a bow, and that's all the robot's good for, really. Like I say, here you'll notice that I try and do as much as I can with each character before switching. It doesn't matter too much in some areas, because it's kind of like, if you're not going to do a movement at this point, you're just going to do it when you swap back. So sometimes it's just down to preference of how you want to do it. For example, when I pushed the block the first time, I could have just switched, done jump, and then moved the second time, but just preference to moving over in there. But it's brought us along. Some things you think might save time, but you're just going to have to do a different movement later. So some things you just can't save time on. Now we're coming to the basement. This is pretty much the same as old patch, actually. They did try and fix it, but they didn't do the best of jobs. There's one point coming up now where there's a bit of randomness, and something that was considered bad luck in old patch is now considered good luck in this patch. So see here, once I get through these crushing walls, there's a robot in the next room, and you want him to be as close to you as possible. You can spawn in one of 3 places, and he spawned in the furthest away place. He can spawn in here, which is super quick, or just outside, which is slightly quicker, or over here, which is slowest. Not by an awful lot, but you know what I mean, it would save a few seconds to get him in that room. Like I say, a lot of the time saves in this run are merely just seconds. Currently, at least with the tech that I've found so far. So kind of adding on to more what I was saying about this whole first part just being a tutorial. You can see here they're really hammering home the switching mechanic of forcing you to change characters every few seconds, which really starts to add up when you think that it takes a couple of seconds for each transition, and we do at least 10, 15, so that's a good 20 seconds just in transitions. But we're coming up to the skip now. If you've watched the old video, you'll know exactly what I'm about to do. This checkpoint here is event based, which is why we have to do this in the first place. It will only trigger once that door is open up top. But now that we've done that, we can leave the basement, and using the girl's pretty floaty jump, Go around the outside, see some geometry you're not supposed to see. Go around. This bit I felt they tried to patch, because if you jump straight up into it, it'll kill you, but if you jump at a slight angle, it won't. So like I said, that bit's kind of patched, but not really, because we do the exact same thing. Here's some new tech they added. Well, not tech. For some reason, they added a couple of crates here. You couldn't get up here before in the whole patch, but you can in this patch, which now actually gives us the quickest way of getting over here. It's pretty much just a straight line. Which is nice. Don't know why that was added. But the whole reason we have to get over here anyway is just for this checkpoint. Otherwise, you'll see here we're going back to pretty much just where we came from. But we have to hit that checkpoint to activate this checkpoint here. Coming's a pretty big skip, which doesn't look like anything, but that saved about a minute. Like I said, normally you have to come through as both characters, shoot some targets. There's a couple of buttons on each side, and you're meant to have one character on each button. But just hitting that checkpoint trigger, because it's only position based, it activates as soon as you touch it, and the death warp brings both characters to this location. Obviously, because we left the robot in the basement, so bringing him all the way over here would take quite a bit of time. This part's pretty awful, in the fact that it's just pretty boring. There's not a lot happening. There's nothing we can do to speed it up, because we need to hit a checkpoint on the other side of this drawbridge that we're trying to lower. And the only way we can lower it is doing this boring kind of, not puzzle, it's barely even a puzzle, but it's the only way we can do it. As you can see, these kind of animations are ridiculously slow. Swapping between each character is ridiculously slow. But we have to do it. It's also the worst area to die on. Like anything before we go, well, before we get to the other side of that little kind of, that gate there, is a terrible place to die, because it will cost you a minute or so. You go right back to the start of that puzzle. But we're safe now, so. Coming up to the boss skip, they tried to patch the boss skip by moving the last checkpoint before the boss from just outside the gate to just inside the gate. But what they didn't do was change the trigger for the actual boss fight itself. So you'll see here the boss fight won't trigger until we hit the checkpoint. But now we're going to hit the checkpoint and just not go into the boss room. And that lets us just skip to the next level. Hey boys. Yeah, so that again kind of patched. Only costs us maybe 5 seconds just to do the character switching compared to the old patch. This part is mainly the same. The only real changes are at the end. So I won't talk too much about what we do here, but basically you're supposed to be the robot for a lot of this, at least until the third island, but again, because the physics are so floaty with the girl, we can just jump on top of all the maze walls, just go straight to the point. I had to take a slightly slower route here, just because of that enemy over there. He would have caught me if I'd have gone up the regular way, and then I messed up the jump anyway. So again, a few seconds lost there. But nothing major. Like I said, now we're up to the point where you should have the girl. Basically, normally what you do is you go through this whole path as a robot, and then at this point, you kind of swap over, so now you would come up as the girl. I guess a slight bit of new tech here. Now we jump up this vine to avoid the enemies on the other side of that wall. We used to just freeze them because it was more consistent. But yeah, now we jump over, just because we can't freeze them. This cutscene is skippable, but it's only, well, it's a little bit faster to watch it and then do the skip that I did afterwards than it is to skip over it. You have to climb up a thing. It's a little inconsistent. So that's a little bit faster. This is slightly different than old patch as well. We have to wait a bit for them to get kind of close to us, just so there's no one at the other side, just so we don't get captured and lose a lot of time. This is also new. You'll see here I'm trying to get as close to the edge as I can without falling off. For some reason the enemies here won't start chasing after you if you're really far to the edge. You'll see I kind of messed it up a little bit, but fortunately they had the slowest enemy at the front, so I was able to save that. But that's something I discovered this week which saved a bit of time, because it used to be that we'd have to go over as the robot, which involved opening that gate the regular way and then picking up the girl and then walking through. So I estimated that itself saves maybe about 20 seconds. And again, this part is just as intended. I believe this is the quickest way of solving this. Generally, I'm just trying to move as little as the robots. You'll see the robots' path that I've left for him is as straight of a line as I could get. And like I say, we need the robot to get into here. Because of that, you can get in here as the girl, but you can't do anything because you need to shoot that target with an arrow. Another bit of new tech coming up here as well, actually. What we used to do on this version is activate this bell as the girl, and then just run through as the robot. Just hope you don't get hit. And like I say, there can be fluctuations of around 10 seconds depending on what look you get. But if we take a few seconds to go around, we miss an enemy trigger. So you'll see none of the enemies are activated. Fortunately, these guys don't have a separate trigger, so we can just walk straight through right into the final level. Which is there's no new tech in this final level compared to my last PB, but there is compared to Old Patch. So I mentioned that this first part's the same. Like I say, you run over here to hit a checkpoint on top of this bridge. Now normally what we'd do is we'd fall into the water to death warp the robot back over there, but you'll see in a second why I can't death warp the robot over to this position. We had to do a menu warp. Like I say, I'll hit this. It's up to the girl, get her inside the gate, onto the lift. And now we can just walk on the water. Basically why this has happened is they added a new water texture, water feature to the game. But they didn't raise, it was a bit higher than the old water, but they didn't raise the kill level in the water. They basically just treated the water as a solid object. So we just walk right past it. That skips a really monotonous part of, at least it was the worst part of Old Patch, of not really a boss rush, more an enemy rush, where you're in super tight enclosed rooms with 4 to 6 enemies in them, and that could cause runs to either completely die or fluctuate anywhere from like 20 to 30 seconds. Unfortunately here as well, we have to do this last boss legit now. Again, we used to freeze the enemies, and it was no problem. Now we have to do it legit. This, like, the first 2 phases aren't too bad. It's this last phase which is the real problem, which is a shame because it's the very last thing you'll do. But you can lose runs here. Like I say, that robot there, just that one, can get stuck on the platform, which can mess up the positioning of these guys. Fortunately, I didn't get hit there. That was very nearly run over. Like I say, coming up to the final hit now, and that is time. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'm actually going to be running this at ESA Winter 18, which is part of the whole reason why I started to find more of these tricks. So thanks to those guys for helping push this category down a little bit. Any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. A lot of people ask if you can do this on console, and the main answer is I don't really know, because I've not played console. I imagine anything that doesn't involve the quick turns of the mouse and keyboard movement should be possible, because they're pretty much the same game. But like I say, any questions, feel free to ask. Yeah, hopefully some of you run this game. Thanks for watching.